Tonight, House divided. The drama over the speakership in the House enters a new phase.
It's not how you start, it's how you finish.
Plus, from zero COVID to COVID surge.
This wave is going across the entire country in, at lightning speed.
The full impact of COVID-19 descends on China. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. Kevin McCarthy gains momentum in the race for House Speaker. Good evening in Washington. I'm Jenna Browder. After 4 days of failed votes, significant progress on Capitol Hill today as the House gets closer to picking a leader. CBN News Capitol Hill correspondent Matt Galka is tracking all of the yeses and nos and has the latest. Matt?
And there sure are a lot to track, but Kevin McCarthy made some significant strides and got more members back on his side today. He's consistently faced 20 or so members of his own party who refused to vote for him until now. On the 12th vote for House Speaker, McCarthy was able to win over more than a dozen of the Republicans who previously voted for other people. It wasn't enough to win just quite yet, but it showed negotiations were working. Florida's Byron Donalds, who had himself been nominated as an alternate candidate, flipped back to supporting McCarthy Friday.
What I trust is that he's going to do the job necessary to lead our conference and lead the House of Representatives. And in this institution, trust is one of those things, to quote Ronald Reagan, that you always have to verify. And what this agreement does, it allows the members of Congress to verify the trust that we're instilling in Kevin McCarthy.
Oh, I wouldn't want to speculate on a timeline. Obviously, it is hard to predict when a breakthrough happens, but I've got to tell you, I am more confident now that we're going to get this done than I have been for a long time. The reality is that this agreement is getting closer and closer. It's within reach. That doesn't mean it's a foregone conclusion, but it means it's within reach.
The exact details of what McCarthy may or may not have given into haven't been made public yet, but there is still a faction of Republicans who vowed never to vote for the California Republican.
You only earn the position of Speaker of the House if you can get the votes. Mr. McCarthy doesn't have the votes today. He will not have the votes tomorrow, and he will not have the votes next week, next month, next year.
The House did vote to adjourn until 10 o'clock tonight, and McCarthy will need to flip 2 more no votes. But he seemed pretty confident. He told reporters he believes he could clinch the Speaker's gavel tonight. Jenna?
All right, we will see. Matt Galka, thank you very much. Well, before lawmakers got back to voting, a gathering of remembrance for the fallen officers of the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Today marks the 2nd anniversary. Former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi telling the families of the officers who died that day that she and her colleagues are forever grateful.
Law enforcement heroes confronted the insurrectionists to protect the Capitol, the Congress, and our Constitution. And it is with great respect and admiration that we are joined by the families this morning. Thank you to the families for considering us worthy to share your grief, to honor your loss.
President Biden marked the anniversary by awarding 12 people with the Presidential Citizens Medal. Among the recipients, law enforcement officers who were injured defending the Capitol, several state election officials who resisted pressure from former President Trump to overturn election results, and Capitol Police officer Brian Sicknick, who died of a stroke the day after being assaulted during the Capitol attack. Meredith McGraw is a national political correspondent at Politico and joins us now. Hi, Meredith. Thanks for coming on the show tonight. So chaos on the Hill. January 6th, and now 2 years later, here we are, this battle over the speakership. Is America any less divided?
You know, that's a great question. Here on this anniversary of January 6th, there was a recent survey that came out that showed just how divided people are about this day. With about half of Americans, thinking that the former president deserves to be criminally charged for what happened, and that the January 6th committee holds significance, and another half that just simply feels the opposite. And we saw some of those fault lines play out on the House floor this past week. And there are deep divisions even within the Republican Party about what the GOP should look like moving forward, and what the image of the future of that part of the party should be.
You know, if Kevin McCarthy can pull this out, Meredith, will he have the power to actually govern? How much has this process diminished his ability to lead?
That's a great question. You know, throughout these past few days, Kevin McCarthy and his team have been making deals with some of these so-called rebel House members over things like committee assignments and voting procedures that some people say really ties his hands. Now, McCarthy has spun that around. He said that, these are, he's happy to make these concessions, to get these votes on board, but that it's just part of the deliberations that should go on with these speaker votes. But there has been criticisms that it could really weaken him and his role as a speaker. And then just the chaos that we saw unfold over the past 4 days, the debates, these endless Groundhog Day-like rounds of voting that we've seen has called into question what he might be like as a leader, and if he will be able to corral the Republican House members.
You know, there's a conversation about how much power the speakership should have. Some say Nancy Pelosi had too much. Kevin McCarthy could have very little if he does pull this out. Meredith, could stripping the speakership of some of its power actually be a solution to the gridlock on the Hill?
Well, that's what some of the Republicans who've made some of these demands have said, that this is something that actually would empower members. Now, we still have to wait and see what happens moving forward. As your congressional reporter was just telling us, the House has been adjourned. There's still holdouts who say that they are not going to be voting for McCarthy no matter what. And McCarthy's team is really going to be trying to put the pressure on two House members, Crane and Rosendale, to try to get them on board. And they're coming back later tonight. So it's yet to be seen if McCarthy really is going to make it and be speaker here. But there's a lot of work that's being done behind the scenes, even with former President Trump, to try to get these holdouts on board and really finish this vote once and for all.
All right, Meredith McGraw with Politico. It's wonderful work that you guys do. We appreciate you coming on tonight. Thanks, Meredith.
Thanks for having me.
And to the economy, signs point to a cooling labor market in the upcoming year, with hiring and wage gains easing in the last month of the year, and with the Federal Reserve raising interest rates to the highest level in 15 years. The final jobs report of 2022 out today shows the labor market remaining strong, unemployment falling to a record 3.5%, and payrolls increasing by 223,000 in December. The smallest gain in 2 years, according to the Labor Department. But with an increase in average hourly earnings of 0.3% rather than 0.4%, economists expected. From zero COVID to a COVID surge coming up for the first time in 3 years, why China is suddenly seeing the full effects of COVID-19. Welcome back. New year, same triple-demic we saw before the holidays. COVID, the flu, and RSV still spreading with a vengeance. The triple threat of respiratory viruses is especially dangerous for older and at-risk adults. And the winter months, well, they're not helping. Cold weather drives people indoors closer together and for longer periods of time, where droplets can spread from an infected person to someone close by. Hospitals in warmer California are stressed by a rise in flu, RSV, and COVID levels, too. For the first time in nearly 3 years, China is feeling the full impact of COVID-19. Nationwide protests led to a complete reversal of the country's zero COVID policy. Now COVID-19 is surging and the death toll rising. National security correspondent Caitlin Burke reports on what China's COVID crisis could mean here at home.
A new wave of travel restrictions are in effect for passengers flying in from China. Anyone 2 years and older must now provide airlines with a negative COVID test result taken no more than 2 days before departure.
Given the fact that we don't have clear data about how much COVID is circulating in China and what variants are circulating, I'm not surprised that the CDC has taken these additional steps to keep the United States protected.
Health experts now say with certainty that the COVID situation in China is bad, although Beijing has yet to release any official data.
For a country as vast as China, it's very difficult. You can follow the same news stories that everyone else is and see pictures of makeshift morgues and swelling hospitals, but it's actually very difficult to get a sense of just how representative this is.
Given the communist government's continued lack of transparency, other countries are also pushing for greater restrictions. Italy is performing genomic testing on travelers arriving from China to hopefully learn what variant is circulating there. The U.S. is considering testing wastewater from international aircraft for the same purpose. However, Dr. David Dowdy, an epidemiologist and professor at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, says he doesn't believe a new variant should be a major concern.
Even with this surge, I'm sure that in January, China is not going to account for the majority of the world's COVID-19 transmission. This is something that's happening around the world, and these every time the virus is transmitted, it gets a chance to mutate.
Dowdy believes the biggest flaw in Beijing's zero COVID reversal is failing to mandate vaccinations before removing restrictions. He also maintains the world's biggest focus should be on humanitarian aid, as China's death toll is likely skyrocketing.
We're talking about a country that has more than 4 times as many people as the United States, and this wave is going across the entire country in at lightning speed, when a lot of people have not been vaccinated or ever seen this virus before. And so this is COVID mortality on a scale we haven't seen globally since last winter.
I also spoke with China military expert Brad Bowman with Freedom for Defense of Democracies. He says that while there's also not much information on how this surge is affecting China's military, he assumes it's having a similar impact to what hit the U.S. military during the worst days of the pandemic. That would involve canceled training exercises, delayed deployments, and a slowdown in the development and production of new weapons and equipment. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.
Thank you, Caitlin. And when we come back, the Virginia governor and his faith. How Glenn Youngkin said God was involved in his decision to run for office. As we close out the first week of the new year, governors-elect across the country are being sworn in. Inauguration ceremonies set throughout this month. 36 states had elections for governors this year, with each party winning 18 of those races. Democrats flipped the governor's mansions in Arizona, Massachusetts, and Maryland, while Republicans gained a governorship in Nevada. When Glenn Youngkin won the 2021 Virginia governor's race, he shocked the political world. The Republican sweeping victory coming only 1 year after President Biden carried the Commonwealth by 10 points. During the campaign, Youngkin stressed he didn't run for his own political ambitions, but rather to answer a calling from God. Abigail Robertson recently sat down with Virginia's governor and first lady to discuss how they're leaning on their faith in these executive roles.
Before becoming governor, Glenn Youngkin spent 25 years at his dream job at the Carlyle Group, a private equity firm. He prayed each year that if the Lord had something else for him, he'd lead him there. One day during his prayer time, Youngkin says God made it clear he did indeed have something very different in store.
I'm forever grateful in him calling out to me and saying, step out of where you're comfortable and go someplace where you're uncomfortable.
That place was politics.
After a period of time of reflecting and praying, in July, I went to Suzanne and said, I'm going to quit my job at Carlyle. And she looked at me and said, have you lost your mind? And she said, what are you going to go do? And I said, well, I think I'm going to go run for governor.
Once Youngkin felt God's calling, he acted quickly.
When he came to me and said, he not only said, I'm going to retire, but he said, I'm going to retire this weekend. I was pretty taken aback.
Yeah, I think there might have been a tear or two. And we prayed over it right then and there. And And when you tell your forever love that you're going to quit this job tomorrow, it's unsettling. And it really was a big step for both of us.
By January 2021, Youngkin had officially entered the governor's race. He went on to win the GOP primary and eventually the governorship by almost 2 points, becoming Virginia's first elected Republican governor in 12 years.
Were you surprised when you won?
I was, there wasn't a day in the campaign that I wasn't surprised about a lot. We didn't know much going into this. And we went into it with just a basic commitment that we were going to run a campaign that would reflect us, and to do it in a way that was consistent with our beliefs and would make those people that had invested their treasure and time with us proud.
Throughout the campaign, the Younkins leaned on their faith.
We were able to do it in a way that I think was very representative of what we aspired to do, which is to give him glory and honor during this, and to be a light along the way, and not to walk away from our faith, but to walk into it, and to not be ashamed of the fact that we pray and we look to the Lord for help every day. And I think that was just incredibly encouraging.
As governor, Youngkin says he begins each day asking God for help.
My day really does start with Psalm 121, and I lift my eyes up to the hills, and I ask where my help comes from. And I know my help comes from the Lord, maker of heaven and earth. There are tough decisions, and there's a big difference between trying to find the right path forward and trying to make everybody happy. And I think if you're doing the latter, then we're not doing the job. And the job requires tough decisions. And tough decisions require discernment.
And he adds, the Lord continues to reveal himself.
I have to say, what he has been showing me is grace, because I'm reminded every day that there was only one perfect person in the history of this planet, and it certainly was not me. And he shows me grace every day.
Youngkin believes he's been given this platform to help put parents back in control when it comes to what their children learn in schools.
One of the big challenges that we saw was the fact that parents were being pushed out of their children's lives, and oftentimes at the moments where children need them the most. And so we have absolutely stepped into an effort to empower parents and to make sure that their fundamental right to make decisions for their children is not just protected, but is enforced.
And he offers this advice to other believers who feel called to run for office.
Don't worry too much, because all things are possible with him. And he calls us to be obedient. He doesn't tell us how it's going to turn out. He just calls us to be obedient. And I felt from the moment that I told Suzanne I'm quitting my job tomorrow, this huge weight come off of me. And I felt encouraged this in every day, every moment.
The First Lady says she sees her work with Virginians as a mission field.
I have felt in my heart that my role could be missional, and that if I would approach it that way, if I would approach people with dignity, if I would treat everyone like they were made in the image of God, and if I wouldn't worry so much about getting it right, but rather just serving, that hopefully we would do a good job.
They're thankful for the Lord's protection over their entire family.
I'm just so proud of our kids, because they didn't wake up one morning and say, we'd really like for our dad to run for governor and become kind of, politically known. And they didn't ask for that. And they have been fabulous. And so I'm just so proud of them.
And grateful for prayers from both friends and those they've never met.
I always want to make sure that they understand that we see the manifestation of those prayers every day, every single day. And it's extraordinary to know that people are praying for you, people who we've never met.
While the governor's name is often included on lists of 2024 presidential candidates, he says right now his focus remains on Virginia.
The reality is that I have been very focused on the job that I'm doing, and the midterm elections were just a few weeks ago. And I think coming out of the midterm elections, I think our biggest challenge right now is to go deliver And I think anyone newly elected, or those of us elected just 1 year ago, have to stay focused on delivering.
Youngkin says his goal as governor is to deliver results for the Virginians who hired him. He also intends to keep working with the state's divided legislature in hopes of passing bills with bipartisan support. Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Thank you, Abigail. Great interview. And up next, how a Christian couple turned a nightmare before Christmas into a Christmas miracle. Finally tonight, the kindness of strangers. When hundreds of people were stranded, freezing in their cars during a blizzard in New York just days before Christmas, Pastor Al Robinson and his wife Vivian opened their doors both at church and at home to take in over 150 people.
We were doing breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks. I had to pick up an 84-year-old woman on my shoulders, carry her to the bathroom.
And the Robinsons pastor the Spirit of Truth Urban Ministry in Buffalo. They say this was an opportunity to share the gospel and, of course, the Christmas message with these stranded travelers. And we'll leave it on that note tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great weekend.